All right, so get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into modern dating. We're going to be looking at some pretty interesting questions about like power dynamics, expectations in relationships, and who's really in control these days. Our source material today is a conversation with a woman. She's successful and confident, and she has some pretty strong opinions about, her worth in the dating game. She basically says flat out that she's the prize, and that obviously sparked a whole debate about the roles men and women play in relationships today.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is how her perspective challenges a lot of the traditional assumptions. It pushes back against that idea that men are always the ones pursuing and women are just kind of sitting around waiting to be chosen.
Right, it totally flips the script.
Yeah.
But of course, not everyone agrees with her. The men in this conversation actually counter her argument with this whole concept of supply and demand.
Mm.
They basically say that because there are so many attractive women out there, men have more options and a woman's value kind of diminishes because of that.
It's almost like they're applying economics to dating, which is kind of a strange comparison.
Yeah, it is a little bit strange, but it's interesting how they use these images like music video shoots and nightclubs to try and prove their point.
Right, they're describing this environment where men are just constantly surrounded by beautiful women, and it reinforces their argument that women need to go above and beyond to stand out from the crowd and, keep a man interested.
I see what you mean. It kind of creates this idea that women are constantly competing with each other.
Yeah.
There's a whole other issue. But this woman, she doesn't back down at all. She even talks about a recent breakup where she felt totally justified in ending things after a disagreement.
Which is something I think a lot of people can relate to.
Oh, yeah, totally. Disagreements happen in every relationship.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating how the men in this conversation frame it.
They present it as a failure on her part to keep a man. Modern women have just forgotten how to nurture a relationship and put their partner's needs first.
So basically, they think women should just be more accommodating and just go back to those traditional gender roles.
It definitely makes you wonder how much their perspective is being influenced by societal expectations.
Yeah, like that whole women should be seen and not heard thing. But this conversation gets even more intense when they start talking about apologies.
Oh, yeah, that's where the power dynamics really come into play.
So she mentions that she didn't apologize to her ex after their disagreement. And the men have a really strong reaction to that.
They think a sincere apology is absolutely essential for a woman if she wants to keep a man happy, especially if he's a successful man.
Wait, so they're saying women should apologize even if they don't think they did anything wrong? That seems really unfair.
It definitely raises some eyebrows. It
Oh.
seems like they're coming from this place where women should always prioritize a man's happiness, even if it means, ignoring their own feelings.
Wow, that's pretty intense. It really highlights how different their views are on expectations and respect in a relationship. On the one hand, you have this woman who's standing up for herself and refusing to compromise her values. And on the other, you have these men who are stuck in this idea that a woman's main priority should be keeping a man happy. It's this clash between traditional and modern views on dating. And it definitely gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's like this constant back and forth between individual empowerment and these societal expectations that are so ingrained. So you have this woman who's really confident and knows her worth, but she's getting pushed back because she doesn't fit this traditional mold.
And it gets even more complicated when you factor in that she's financially successful. That seems to be a big part of the men's argument.
Oh, absolutely. They definitely see her financial independence as a potential problem in her dating life. They say because she's successful, she's going to be more selective, which means she's limiting her options.
So basically they're saying she's too picky.
It's like they're saying, well, if you're so successful, why are you still single? Like her success is somehow a bad thing in the dating world.
It's like they're trying to use her accomplishments against her, as if that means she should be more willing to settle.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that central question of power dynamics. Who gets to set the rules in modern dating? The men in this conversation seem to think men are in control because of that whole supply and demand thing.
Right. They think men have all the options, while women, especially successful women, are the ones with limited choices.
But that completely ignores the choices women are making today. This woman has high standards, and she's not willing to settle, and she's not the only one.
Definitely. More and more women are choosing to prioritize their own happiness in relationships. They're not just following these outdated expectations anymore.
It's a huge shift that's really shaking things up and challenging those old assumptions about gender roles and who has the power.
It's like we're watching the rules of the game change right in front of us.
So the big question is, how do we create a more balanced approach to dating? where everyone feels valued and respected.
That is the million-dollar question. And this kind of conversation is a good starting point.
Definitely by talking about these different viewpoints and challenging those old beliefs, we can start to understand modern dating in a more nuanced way.
And hopefully that leads to healthier, happier relationships for everyone. It's kind of crazy how this conversation shows that tension, between what you want as a person and what society expects. So she's making choices to be happy,
Yeah.
but then she's getting criticized because it doesn't fit with the traditional view of how a woman should act.
And it's interesting how the men in this conversation tried to make it about all women. Like they're using these generalizations about modern women to kind of dismiss her, as if any woman who wants more for herself and doesn't fit the mold is automatically a problem.
It's like they're saying her worth depends on whether she makes a man happy instead of her own goals and achievement.
Right, and that brings us to that whole idea of keeping a man, which is a pretty loaded phrase when you think about it.
Yeah, what does that even mean?
It implies that a woman's job is to make sure the man is happy, even if it means she's unhappy.
That doesn't sound like a real partnership at all.
Exactly. In a healthy relationship, both people should be contributing and supporting each other. It's not about one person constantly trying to keep the other one satisfied.
So where do we go from here? What does this mean for the future of dating?
Well, it seems like the old rules don't work anymore. Women are raising their standards and they're not going to settle.
Which is a good thing, right?
Definitely, it shows that women are taking control and making their own choices. But it also means we have to rethink what makes a relationship good.
This whole conversation has been really thought-provoking. It shows how different people view dating today. And it highlights how important it is to understand, power dynamics and how everyone has the right to make their own choices.
If we want to move forward, we have to keep having these conversations. We need to question those old beliefs and be open to new ways of thinking about relationships.
And most importantly, everyone deserves respect no matter what.
So as you're figuring out your own dating life, think about this. If being attractive and keeping a man happy are the most important things, what does that say about men and women in relationships?
That's a really good question to think about. And we hope this deep dive has given you some things to consider as you navigate the world of modern dating.